Synesthesia. If everyone could see the things that I hear. Synesthesia. A giant box of Crayolas in my ear.
Seeing colors when you listen to music, tasting words, or seeing your calendar in the form of steps stretched out in front of you are all examples of a neurological condition called synesthesia. Literally, synesthesia means joined senses. Synesthesia occurs when the different areas of your brain responsible for your senses experience a crosstalk that isn't present in the average human brain. In this podcast, we will discuss what synesthesia is and isn't, the theories of development, and how this condition affects learning.
Synesthesia was first recorded in 1812 by George Tobias Ludwig Sachs, but not until recent decades has it seen a jump in research interest. For a long time, many researchers wrote synesthesia off as fabricated because it could not be proven outside of personal accounts from participants. This disinterest is clearly seen during the mid-20th century when behaviorism was at its peak. Because behaviorism relies on research through observable behaviors, synesthesia was not at all applicable. It wasn't until the cognitive revolution and the technology boom we are experiencing now that synesthesia could be readily studied and observed through methods such as an fMRI.
So what exactly is synesthesia? Synesthesia can be defined as involuntary, automatic, and stable associations between different sensory areas of the brain. Sensations are triggered in one part of the brain by sensations or perceptions in a different part of the brain. Later in this podcast, we will discuss the different theories of the development of synesthesia.
It is also important to discuss what synesthesia isn't. Synesthesia is not just a cry for attention. Most synesthetes never talk about their condition because they either believe everyone perceives the world the way they do, or they were ridiculed when they shared their experiences and consequently remained silent. Synesthesia is also not just an overenthusiastic metaphoric language. The connections synesthetes report do not change according to context or over time. Associations remain stable once formed early in childhood. The associations synesthetes make are very idiosyncratic, but they are simple and elementary. For example, synesthetes with colored hearing experience simple geometric bursts of colors where a non-synesthete may associate a musical piece with the whole landscape. Another important thing to note is that synesthetes do not substitute or mistake one sense for another. Each sense is experienced separately but simultaneously.
There are multiple types of synesthesia that have been discovered. For example, grapheme color synesthesia is a condition in which letter and/or number stimuli elicit a perception of a color that corresponds with the character. These types of perceptions occur naturally with no effort from the individual to make these connections. Also, each letter in color or number in color pairing are consistent. For example, if someone with grapheme color synesthesia naturally associates the number 5 with the color green, then the number 5 will always be green to them. Some pairings are more common than others, but each grapheme color synesthete has their own individual connections that were made during development. Time, number, and spatial representation, or TNS synesthesia, is a description of how individuals view timelines, calendars, and numbers in their mind. About 1 in 5 individuals have TNS and may not even realize it. Here is an example of a woman who has TNS synesthesia.
Another thing that may not seem like crossing of the senses so much, that I do have, is my number line is spatially arranged in a fixed way, so that when I think about numbers, or when I do math in my head, there are specific places in the environment that I go to in my head when I think about them. And my months are in a circle, in a wheel. And when I think today is, March 3rd, it goes to that part in the wheel. And if I imagine, no, today is January 10th, my birthday, it goes to January 10th.
The first discovery of TNS synesthesia was in the late 1800s, but the research did not pick up steam until the late 1990s and early 2000s. TNS synesthetes could see anything from the months of the year in the shape of a circle to a timeline projecting away from them as if it was three-dimensional. Previous studies have pointed out that TNS synesthesia actually makes it easier to process time and space problems, numerical information, and to memorize dates. TNS synesthetes consistently perform better in tasks regarding time and space. However, they do not perform significantly better than their non-synesthete counterparts in tasks regarding aspects that are not related to their form of synesthesia, such as vocabulary. It is believed that TNS synesthesia affects the parietal lobe which is the area of the brain responsible for time and space.
Here is a testimony of someone who has grapheme color synesthesia and TNS synesthesia.
It's more than one sense for me when I'm experiencing something like that. All along I had thought that everyone had experienced things like music, and through this conversation with him and afterwards doing some of my own research, found out that I actually kind of have certain forms of this condition. That was kind of a weird self-discovery, I guess, because it's just not something I ever thought about or thought would be a unique thing, just because it's how I've always perceived stuff.
Synesthesia is far more common than the average person might think. Though statistics vary from 1 in 2,000 to 1 in 11, a commonly accepted statistic is about 4%, or 1 in 23. The most common form of synesthesia is color time units, with the second most common being grapheme color synesthesia. Having one type of synesthesia gives you a 50% chance of having a second or third type. This is called polymodal. Synesthesia is more common in children than in adults, something that we will explain a little later in this podcast when we discuss theories of development. The neonatal synesthesia hypothesis suggests that everyone is born with the characteristic cross-modality of synesthesia, but for most people, these connections are blocked off. It is a universal condition in infants that is weaned out during developmental synaptic pruning. This theory calls to attention the great connectivity and jumble of neurons babies are born with. Synaptic pruning occurs during development in order to create more meaningful connections and get rid of useless ones. Synesthesia occurs when there is a lack of this synaptic pruning, and the connections between the different sensory and perception areas of the brain persist into adulthood.
The cross-activation theory of synesthesia suggests that synesthesia develops when synaptic pruning is not completed during an individual's childhood. The theory states that connections between neurons can get crossed, which can cause different sense perceptions. For example, an individual exposed to an auditory stimulus can have a response that would be expected from a visual stimulus. In newborns, an auditory stimulus does in fact evoke a visual response, but this phenomenon does not completely disappear until about the age of 3 in those without synesthesia. Another widely believed theory of synesthesia is the disinhibition feedback theory. This theory suggests that information that is transmitted between primary sensory cortical areas is disinhibited. This means that a stimulus can elicit the wrong sensory response. The disinhibition feedback theory states that incomplete synaptic pruning is not the cause of synesthesia. It is believed that the cause is the inhibition of the synapses that are remaining, resulting in them not functioning properly.
While nature plays the more dominant role in most synesthetic theories, nurture also has its part. Researchers from the University of Edinburgh examined the idea that synesthesia may be a developed condition rather than pre-existing. They found that grapheme color synesthesia matures over time with increasing consistency in the synesthetic associations as development continues. They used data that suggests that synesthesia is an ongoing process along with brain development and results from delayed or failed pruning. There is an emphasis on the necessity for the development of synesthetic triggers before certain variants of synesthesia may form.
In the past 2 years, evidence has been found to show that there is a genetic link between synesthesia, specifically TNS, and savant autism. Those with autism may have difficulty in social situations, but are often extremely capable of remembering dates and other numerical data. It is also possible that individuals with autism experience abnormal perceptions that are highly similar to an experience that would occur in a synesthete. Both synesthesia and savant autism allow individuals to have extraordinary abilities. Also, both allow for further research regarding the link between synesthesia and autism, as well as both types of abilities individually.
Memory improves when more associations are linked to the thing that you are trying to remember. A research subject, simply referred to as S, demonstrates an incredibly unique and extraordinary memory. He has near-perfect memory, and this can be partly attributed to his polymodal synesthesia. Every word has a whole slew of associations, and all of them come to S immediately and automatically. All the exercises normal people may try to employ to remember information come completely naturally to S. This is one extreme example of how synesthesia can help improve memory. Other research has shown that synesthetes outperform non-synesthetes when faced with memory tests. The extra associations between letters and colors aid their memory. However, if the letters presented are colored in a way that is incongruent with the participants' synesthetic associations, their performance plummets.
Synesthesia affects more people worldwide than most people expect. Many individuals have synesthesia and do not even realize it before they hear the condition explained. They believe their perceptions are completely normal. Some even view synesthesia as a disorder, while others view it as a condition with amazing abilities that they wish they could experience. In our opinions, and in the opinions of many researchers, the wide varieties of synesthesia are causes of interest. It also opens up new spectrums of research to help us learn more about how synesthesia develops in childhood and infancy and how it affects the synesthete population.
And I see color.